Welcome to the English with Kirsty podcast from www.englishwithkirsty.com. Here I'll be sharing with you tips, information and other learning resources so that you can improve your business English. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 101 of the English with Kirsty podcast. Just a couple of quick announcements before I start. If anybody missed it, last time was episode 100 and I put together a list of 100 resources to help you with your business English. So if you want to get your copy of that PDF, then you can also request it on the show notes page for today's podcast, which is www.englishwithkirsty.com/podcast/episode 101, and there'll be a place on the contact form where you can request that. Also, if you are listening to this podcast and you're a teacher, I just wanted to let you know that I have a new teachers page on my website. So englishwithkirsty.com/teachers is the virtual staff room, and on there you'll be able to find out about the new service that I've launched for teachers. And you'll also be able to suggest ideas for articles on the blog. And also, I put a list of articles that I've written about teaching English, teaching online, that kind of thing. They don't usually get covered in this podcast, but if you're interested in them and you are a teacher, then you can head on over to englishwithkirsty.com/teachers and you'll find all the things that I've just mentioned on there. So, today's episode is about something that I mentioned on the blog, and people seem quite interested in the blog, so I thought I'd mention it here as well. So it's this idea of the transition that you make when you're learning a language. So I speak German, and I speak German every day, and sometimes I have whole meetings in German. I do other things as well as teaching, so sometimes I do translation work or proofreading, editing, that kind of thing. And then it can be that all of the correspondence is in German, so that's not a big deal for me now. But I do remember when it was. I remember being in meetings where I wanted to speak to people and I didn't. I remember being in meetings where I wanted to say something and I didn't. And so I can relate to my students when they say they have all these ideas and they don't know how to put them together or to say things at the right time before the moment passes. So I can say to them, I used to feel like this and now I don't have these problems and practice really does help, all these things. But then somebody said to me, well, when did it change then? When did you stop being this person who didn't want to speak German and become someone who was fine with speaking German? And the answer to that is I have no idea. I don't know. I didn't wake up one day and think, oh, I can speak German now, that's great. It was such a gradual thing that I didn't even notice it happening. I can look back at times when I noticed I was definitely making progress. I think the times that I spent in Germany with friends helped. I think all the work I did, voluntary work I did before I set up English with Kirsty helped. I was working on a project for a while where I was the only English person, that definitely helped. But I can't tell you one day when I woke up and thought, right, I'm not scared anymore. Because it didn't work like that. And it is a really gradual process. And it's not that suddenly you think, oh, this is fine. It's just it gets easier and easier to the point where those feelings of wanting to go and hide under the desk aren't there anymore because you've just worked through it. And that doesn't mean that that's a personality change, because for me, when I went back to start another language, I was back exactly in the same place, feeling nervous about speaking. So I think for every language you learn, it's something. If you are prone to that kind of perfectionism and worrying about speaking, then it's something you have to work through for every language. But it does get easier. So I offered 3 tips in the article that I wrote about this, and I will link the article on the show notes page as well. The first one is about generally building your vocabulary, because sometimes the problem hasn't been that I was too nervous to speak. It was that I didn't know how to put some of my ideas across in the other language. And that isn't to do with confidence, that's to do with vocabulary. So if you really want to build your vocabulary, then reading and listening are great, because it's not you building the language, it's somebody else putting the sentences together for you in the other language, whether you're reading them or listening to them. and then you're learning from that other person's use of the vocabulary. Obviously, it's good to be selective about whom you listen to, but if you're learning from other people, that's a really good way to find authentic language. It doesn't mean that you can hide behind this though, because like with my Turkish, I used to say, oh, I'm going to read and listen and read and listen. And if you're going to speak, the only way to improve your speaking is to actually do the speaking. But reading and listening are really powerful ways to improve your language and to build your vocabulary. And then you can start thinking, okay, how would I talk about what I've just read or what I've just listened to? How would I explain that to somebody in English? How would I summarize that? And that can be a really useful exercise in using your own language to summarize something that you've listened to or read. So reading and listening are great in terms of building up your own vocabulary. So the next thing is taking the plunge. It's doing it even when you don't feel like it. It's trying, because if you want to push through this being afraid of speaking, then you have to do something about it and actually do the thing that you're afraid of. And it doesn't mean that you have to jump straight in at the deep end. That is one way, but you can also jump in at the shallow end or in the children's pool. You can find something that will be easier for you. It doesn't have to be a speech in front of 100 people for your first practice. Don't do that, because that's just setting yourself up to fail. And sometimes do something that is fun or is easy or where the pressure is off, and then you can build up to something that's really challenging. I think the worst advice some people can give is to say, oh, if you believe you can do it, you can, because sometimes you really can't. If you haven't practiced, if you haven't got the vocabulary, then just believing you can do something isn't necessarily all it's going to take. You need to put the work in. But I don't believe in making life hard for ourselves. So if there's someone that you can talk to in English, or if you can, have classes or be part of a group or do something where you can build up your confidence, then go and speak to your customers in English in a big meeting or something like that. Make life a bit easier for yourself. If you're somebody that's struggling with speaking anyway, don't put obstacles in your own path. So if you can find some ways to make it easier, then that's great. And then you'll feel prepared for when you have to take the plunge and come out of your comfort zone and do something that's a bit more challenging. And also one-to-one, I'm somebody who prefers one-to-one conversations to big group conversations anyway. That's just part of who I am, and it doesn't matter whether I'm speaking English or German or anything else. But I know I'm better at that. But in terms of speaking and listening and participating, if you do start off with one-to-one conversations, that does make it easier a lot of the time, because you're only focusing on one person, what they're saying, answering their questions, and you have the opportunity to ask them to repeat something. It's different, because when you've got a big group, then people are interacting with each other as well, not just with you, and that can make the speech flow a lot faster and be harder to follow and also to participate. So yeah, try one-to-one if you think that will help you. And the third thing is, do it even when you don't feel like it. So there are days when I know I didn't feel like doing something. Well, I always felt like doing something like reading or listening. That was never a problem for me, finding time to do reading or listening activities, because I enjoyed them. So for me, that wasn't such a big deal. But when it came to speaking, I didn't always feel like doing it. And if you always give way to that voice in your head that says, oh, I don't feel like it today, I'll do it another day, you'll never do it. Like if you really want to do it and make time for it, then you have to make time for it and make yourself, like, talk to yourself and make yourself do it, even if you think, oh, I can't be bothered, I don't want to. Because if it's something that is perhaps your weakest area in language, speaking was always mine. It isn't now. I've brought it up to the same standard as my other skills. But if it's the thing that you're least good at, then you probably won't ever want to do it. And if you wait to the point where you think, yeah, I really want to do it, then you'll be waiting a long time. Sometimes it just takes a bit of self-discipline not to do the things that we find super easy and super fun, but to do the things that make you feel, oh, I can't do this is stressful. So if speaking is that thing for you, then sometimes you just have to say, okay, even if it's just 5 minutes, you don't have to spend all evening doing it. If you can set yourself a time so that you think, okay, this is manageable, it's a manageable chunk of time, not a whole evening of my life, but just 10 or 15 minutes even, then that can be a good way to motivate yourself to do something that you don't really want to do because you don't think you can do it. And then you can always extend that. And if you're having fun, it won't feel like a drag. If you're doing something you enjoy, if you find somebody that you like who speaks English and that you want to spend time with, then it won't feel like such a chore. But sometimes, that if you wait till you feel like doing it and it's your weakest skill, then you could be waiting a very long time. So sometimes you just have to motivate yourself and push through that not wanting to. So these are just 3 tips. So the improving your vocabulary will make it easier to speak. The taking the plunge if you're a bit unsure but just trying anyway. And the showing up even when you don't feel like it, like even if you think, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. If you think like that, you'll always think I'll do it tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes. So yeah, just try to motivate yourself, and then it will get easier, but it will only get easier if you push through this initial stage of not really wanting to speak. And maybe speaking isn't your problem, maybe it's listening or something, and then these things apply too. Like if you do a lot of reading, it will help to improve your vocabulary. If you don't feel like listening but you make time, 5-10 minutes just to do some listening, even if you don't really feel like it, the more you do it, the easier it does become. But the hardest bit is the beginning. So once you've got through the beginning and those stages where it does feel really difficult, then it's like a mountain that gets less steep as you get higher and higher, because it's not so much of a challenge, but that initial part of the mountain is a very steep hill. So once you've climbed that, then you're sorted. So I hope that was useful. Don't forget the 100 resources if you're interested in those. Today's link is englishwithkirsty.com/podcast/episode 101. Have a good week and have fun learning English. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the English with Kirsty podcast. If you have any questions or comments, my email address is kirsty@englishwithkirsty.com, or you can go to www.englishwithkirsty.com/podcast, where you'll find information about the individual episodes.